There is a psychological phenomenon commonly referred to as the white noise effect. When we listen to some type of unstructured sound, like white noise or the sound of a fan or the low hum of the air conditioner, our brains don't like this lack of structure. So we'll start to imagine that there's a kind of discernible structure within this noise, like the rhythm of a song or some kind of a melody. And once we kind of fixate on this maybe imaginary sound, our confirmation bias kicks in and it starts to get more and more complex. And you might even start to hear voices coming through this white noise. Recently, there's been a lot of people in the news, high-ranking officials, people that are kind of tangentially connected to the government, ex-government officials, pilots that used to be in the Air Force, that are saying all this stuff about UFOs. And some people are even saying that we have biological evidence of life forms that are not of this earth. And there's two kinds of waves that people are kind of responding to this. One group believes that aliens have been here all along, and the government is finally admitting it. Another group of people believe this is just a scam by the government to misdirect us and have an excuse to spend a whole lot of money. There's a very interesting collection of writings passed down through the oral tradition that are kind of in the same time frame as a lot of other books from the Old Testament. But this book is not included in the Old Testament. This book is the book of Enoch. And a lot of historians and anthropologists and biblical experts say that this book of Enoch is actually a record of how the first extraterrestrials helped humans build the very first large societies. And it is kind of a mystery as to how we were hunter-gatherers for 190,000 years, and then we just built these massive cities in Egypt and Sumer. And part of the Egyptian hieroglyphics and part of the Sumerian writing system, there's a lot of symbols that look a lot like extraterrestrials and UFOs. There was a book in the 70s, Chariots of the Gods, that was a runaway bestseller that was all about how the theory of how humans were helped along by supremely, superiorly intelligent extraterrestrials that helped us to build the first societies. Recently, I watched a documentary all about extraterrestrials and the possibility of intelligent life forms in the universe. And it started out with the Drake equation. The Drake equation is a very famous equation that estimates how many planets there are in the galaxy that have intelligent life. And they start off with the total number of stars in the entire universe. And then they try to make an estimate of how many of these stars have planets. And then from this group of planets, they try to make an estimate of how many of these planets are in the kind of Goldilocks position like Earth is, the perfect distance away from the sun. Not too far, not too close. Not too cold, not too hot. And then from these Goldilocks planets, they try to make an estimate of how many can support life. And then from this narrower group of planets, they make an estimation of how many of those planets have life that could have evolved into intelligent life. And they're left with a certain number based on the estimates they have of all these other numbers. They end up with a certain number of the amount of planets that exist in the universe that can support intelligent life. But the paradox is they take this number of planets and they figure out if they were average distance apart throughout the entire universe. The summary of the Drake equation is that there's a high probability that there are perhaps millions of planets that have intelligent life, but because they're so far apart from one another, we'll probably never get to meet each other. because of the massive distances. The closest star system to Earth is Alpha Centauri, and that's 4 light years away. And with current technology, there's no way we could go light speed. There's no way we could go half light speed, maybe a tenth of light speed, which meant it would take 50 years just to get there, and then say, hey, in 50 years to come back. And everyone that was alive when you left is all dead, and who do you tell your story to? Then this documentary kind of took a left turn. They started talking to people that claimed they had been abducted, and they go to these abducted by alien support groups, and they all have more or less the same experience. They lose a couple of days, they have vague memories of being probed or whatever, and they come back, they're kind of in a daze, and nobody believes them. But they had this one guy that's actually very popular on social media. He has a large following, and he has these actual live seminars where people pay to come see this guy speak. And this guy's claim to fame is that he has been communing with this alien spirit for several years. He has these seminars, he stands in front of the class, he gets himself in the right state, and this alien spirit takes over his body, and he speaks, the alien spirit speaks to the seminar participants. And he says that there is a huge shift coming to Earth. Earth is about to go through a major transformation, a major level up in technology. And there are certain humans that we need to help in this process. And some of the people in this room are people that we've been watching. You may not think that you're special. You may not think that you're important. But we've been watching you. We've been listening to your thoughts. And in the weeks and months and years ahead, you're going to play a very important role in this transformation. And we'll be watching you carefully over the next few weeks. If you're out in public and you feel like someone's behind you, that's probably us. If you're waiting in line somewhere and you feel like someone's looking at you strangely, that's probably one of us in that person's body watching you. Just to let you know that something big is coming. Something very, very important is coming. Way back when Athens started to become powerful, they set out colonies around the Aegean Sea. That's kind of what empires do. Rome sent out colonies everywhere. When England or Britain invented the Industrial Revolution, they sent colonies around the world. America was a colony of Britain. And right now, we humans are talking about colonizing Mars, putting up habitats on the moon. And maybe in a couple hundred years, when we have the technology, we'll go out to other planets. So it makes perfect sense that if there are extra intelligent extraterrestrials, they would colonize other planets. So the idea that Earth was colonized by far more intelligent beings kind of makes sense, because that's what we do here on Earth. And so it's not really a stretch to believe that in the early days when they were talking about these stories that are now into the Old Testament, they were talking about extraterrestrials rather than gods or angels. One of the interesting things that you can get from the Drake equation is not just the number of planets or how far apart they are, but the average age of the planets. And the age of Earth is much younger than most of these other planets, which means that from a purely probability standpoint, most of the other planets in the universe that have intelligent life are far, far ahead of us as far as intelligence and evolution goes. So if they were to decide to come here, they probably wouldn't be restricted by the kind of basic science we think we understand. They would probably be camouflaged. If somebody goes to Africa to take pictures of lions, they're not going to stand there out in the open with a bright orange suit on. Hey, lion, here I am. They're going to create a very, very camouflaged small little enclosure so they can get really close and take pictures. And so it's not outside of the realm of possibility to imagine that these extraterrestrials not only have massively advanced travel technology, but they probably have some kind of invisibility technology, which means they could be here all along and we're not going to see them. They might even have their version of Google Alerts. If you use Google Alerts, you can type your name into Google, and every time someone uses your name on the internet, you can go see what they're saying. They might have Google Alerts, so whenever there's a meeting and somebody's talking about aliens, they can just poof into the room and see what we're saying and listen to what you're thinking about what we're saying about aliens. Our brains evolved to be pattern recognition devices, to look out into all the noise and see patterns to help us survive. And the question is, did that happen on its own, organically, spontaneously, or were we specifically engineered that way? When the extraterrestrials came to Earth to seed Earth with life, did they engineer this process so they knew we would evolve into humans with brains that are pattern recognition devices, so that when they come to us and talk to us through the white noise, we can understand them? So maybe think about this tonight when you're trying to drift off to sleep and you hear some kind of hum in the background. Maybe pay attention to see if you can hear somebody talking to you. Thank you.